Visibility in the age of AI isn't just about ranking anymore. It's about being understood, trusted, and retrievable by the machines your buyers now rely on. These engines extract only the most relevant chunks of content to answer the query. And if your message isn't structured clearly or consistent across channels, you risk being invisible. That's a quote from David Kirkdorffer and a sneak peek at today's episode. Hi there, I'm Carrie Curran, B2B Revenue Growth Executive Advisor, Industry Analyst, and host of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. Every episode, I sit down with top experts to bring you actionable strategies that drive real results. If you're serious about growth, hit subscribe to stay ahead of your competition. In the new SEO Frontier, How Marketers Can Win Visibility in the Age of AI, I sit down with David Kirkdorffer. He's a B2B marketing strategist and generative SEO expert. We break down how your content, website, and messaging must evolve to be visible in the LLM-powered search. We explore what's changed, what still works, and what's next, so your brand stays front and center no matter which AI engine your buyer turns to. Be sure to stay to the end where David shares why team alignment across content, SEO, PR, and partnerships is your best defense and greatest opportunity in an AI-first future. Let's go. So welcome, David. Please introduce yourself and share your background and expertise.
Hi, Carrie, and thank you so much for bringing me on the show. My background, I am a B2B marketer. I've been doing B2B marketing for, let's say, 30 plus years. I have focused most of my career in the area of marketing that is to do with generating leads for sales teams. And that is still my focus, but the way that is done nowadays has certainly changed. I've worked inside of mostly technology companies selling technology to technology departments. So IT tech for IT tech consumers. And over the years, that's gone from enterprise accounts as technologies become more democratized down to medium-sized businesses and small-sized businesses.
Excellent. So, David, I know you have been deep into the research around what I'll introduce as the evolution of SEO. So tell me, what are you hearing? What's really triggered your interest of diving into the gaining visibility for brands within the GPTs and the other AI engines?
Right. So, okay, that's a great question. Given my background of trying to get information into buyers' hands, being buyer-centric, a number of years ago, I was focused on what we might call buyer enablement and the buyer experience that a buyer has on our website, being successful in finding the information that they're looking for. And I realized that a lot of the great information the buyers would wish for sits behind a gated situation where you have to speak to a sales rep. And so the idea I was trying to work with, and many people, of course, not just myself, this is, feels a bit like old hat now, but can we get this information and put it on our websites so that when buyers come to our website, they are successful in finding the information that they need so that they can say, this looks like a good fit to our situation. And there are a couple of categories of information to place. Along comes these LLMs. And now all of a sudden, I'm thinking in terms of how do I AI enable training, right? How do I make sure that the AIs have got the information that I would want that helps answer buyer questions? In a way, the AI LLM tools are a disintermediary force separating my buyer from my answer. They're turning to the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, the Perplexities, the Claudes, the Copilots, and various other tools that also exist that are a bit more specialized for particular areas of domains of expertise. And so our challenge is to make sure that our answers are somehow being read, understood, correctly represented within these LLMs so that when a buyer goes there, to get the answer. Our brand is visible now there, because it's so much more effective for a buyer to be able to ask a question to a ChatGPT, and you might ask the same question to 4 or 5 of these tools just to kind of validate, because they all have different information sets. They all have different models. They all have different crawlers with different capabilities to be able to read information. And so they all have different licensing agreements with content providers. And so the information profile that each LLM has is slightly different. And so therefore you may have high visibility in one and low visibility in another. And you're like, why? Training data was different. The retrieval data is different. The model itself is different. And so they've got different, if you will, brains. Just like different people, you might ask the same question to different people, you'll get different things. So that's what brought me into this. And again, it's trying to be customer centric. It's trying to help my salespeople, essentially, so that when you do find the information, our brand is there, and now you have a reason to come check us out.
It's excellent, David. And it's such a hot topic. I don't think I can go, through a few hours of my day without it coming up.
Yes.
And I know you've been, evangelizing it a lot, and which I'm sure generates a lot of questions. So what are the main questions people are asking you when it comes to this capability and opportunity?
Everyone wants to know, what am I supposed to do? Right? How is this different? Is it different?
Yeah.
And there are 2 main lines of inquiry that I seem to kind of notice. One is from a more senior member of the marketing team, maybe the CMO or someone in charge at a higher level, who's trying to understand what he or she and their teams can do to make a difference holistically. The other kind of vector of questioning I get is very tactical. People are coming at it from their domain expertise. I'm a website person. I'm an SEO person. I'm a content person. And so naturally enough, and quite reasonably, they're thinking, well, what do I do within my domain that can make an impact? And the truth is, it's a bit of both. One needs to, in my view anyway, it's a holistic problem to solve. You can do just one tactical lane, just the website, just the SEO, just the content, and it will have an impact. When you do them all, it has an amplified impact, but it also wants to involve your PR team and your partner team, your demand gen team. They're also doing things that can either help or hurt how your brand is recognized and turns up in answers. So the 2 questions, the 2 lanes are holistic, tactical. Within the tactical, domain-specific tactics. Within the holistic, it's very much driven by how large the team is or the resources they have available, as to where they will decide to go and what they will decide to work on next.
Yeah. So if the main question is, how do I do this? What do you think they should be asking? What's the right kind of starting point that they should be asking you?
I think you need to have a bit of the holistic kind of big picture. Here's how this is different. Here's how it works. Right? This is what drives things. This is how it's actually different from SEO. This thing called GEO, or Generative Engine Optimization. And of course, it has many acronyms. We haven't settled on one yet. Different vendors are trying to pull it in their direction based on their background, right? So there's Generative Engine Optimization, there's AI optimization, there's LLM optimization, and there are many others that I'm just kind of escaping me right now.
And what do you think it should be based on how you're working within it and what you're seeing?
I like Generative Engine Optimization. Unfortunately, geo also means other things in other domains, which is also part of the problem in geo at a technical level, but also at a brand level. When we use shortcuts like those acronyms, we know what MRO stands for in our business. Of course we do. Contextually, it makes sense on our website. But when an LLM sees MRO, it could mean any one of 50 different things it doesn't know
Right,
which one
right.
you are referring to until you
Mm-hmm.
kind of spell it out first and then refer.
Yeah.
So
So we talked about earlier how you see it as first a mindset. So talk about how that mindset that people should be kind of getting themselves into to be able to really lean into improving their strategies here.
at the highest level, what's going on with LLMs and generative engine optimization is that instead of the user and the interface being a small window where I would drop in a short number of keywords, and then
Mm-hmm.
the, the system, Google, Search, Bing, Brave, will give me back a whole bunch of blue links of web pages where I am asked to now go in and find the needle within that haystack of information that's presented to me. And that
Yep.
haystack is, they try and do their best. This is the best straw at the top. Other people have found this straw to be most interesting. We're doing our best to help you find that needle,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know a whole lot about your necessary intent. We're inferring a bunch. So we've understood the mechanics of that. What's going on with geo, I'll use that term, is that users are placing in lots of context into a larger window, gobs of
Yeah.
context. And through this notion of vectoring and the way LLMs turn language into math so that you can literally add this sentence, subtract that sentence, add this sentence, and end up with a kind of an idea. That process then allows the LLM to go off and scan and find just little chunks of information. It finds the needles. And then it says, okay, among all these potential needles, let me do some more vectoring, figure out what's common across them, what's not. Stuff that seems to be a little on the fringes gets thrown away or doesn't seem to
Yeah.
be validated many places. And so what we end up getting is this answer to the question that we wanted, but we don't know where the
Mm-hmm.
answer exactly came from. And in many cases, we don't care. I mean, we want it to be accurate. We want to be able to cite and find the resource, and we can ask for the resource, the sources to be identified for us. And then it's a good idea for us to go check because sometimes it misunderstands what was on the
Yeah.
source page. That certainly has happened a few times if you bother to check. So the kind of the mental game that's going on here is understanding it's not reading the whole page. It's just reading these little segments.
Yeah.
It's trying to match an intent to a chunk of information, not necessarily the whole thing, just the bit that seems to be relevant. And that means that this is not just a technical HTML or SEO challenge. It's actually, well, what are the words? And how do we phrase it? And how do we make it so it's easily understood so that our turn of phrase or our brand personality style of writing doesn't somehow cloud the answer because our answer is long. Many times the
Mm-hmm.
answers that are being pulled, it also comes down to economics of the systems. I know I'm getting into a bit of details here, but there's this notion called
Yeah.
chunking. And
Yeah.
chunking is where an LLM is trying to find the chunk of information that makes sense to answer this question.
Mm-hmm.
And LLMs trade in what we call tokens. And a certain number of tokens are willing to be spent on trying to get an answer. And the LLMs are trying to figure out how to use fewer and fewer tokens because that's expensive. We pay for that compute power. And
Yeah.
so the size of an answer generally that becomes pulled is 2 or 3 sentences, 2 to 300 words, not necessarily the whole page. It's not saying
Mm-hmm.
I'm when we go to an LLM and say, please summarize this whole page for me, it's like, okay, I'll do that. But when it goes off and tries to find the answer among all of the things that it's memorized, it's not reading through whole pages, it's going to the little chunks. I wish there was a
Yeah.
better term for it because my inner sixth grader is having a kind of a riot thinking about, how do I optimize my chunks?
I'm right there with you, David. So before we kind of dive into more of the tactics, so one thing you've talked about is it really is a different platform than Google or the traditional search engine. So real quick, just kind of, just bring us to that level of explaining further, like how they're different, because that's really going back to a lot of kind of reiterating what you've already said, is how you need to have a different strategy and mindset.
So think of it as standing on the shoulders of the great work that SEO gave us. Okay, if your SEO is weak, then the shoulders you're standing on aren't going to be all that strong.
Yeah.
So for the folks who are hearing this and thinking, well, it's just kind of like a new kind of SEO. Well, there is some truth to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other folks listening might be saying, well, it sounds like you just have to do all the good marketing that was, we already know what we're supposed to do. And I'd say,
Yeah.
yes, that's true too. Absolutely. Many times we're challenged with doing more with less, especially in the last 5
Yes.
years. Has there ever been a time when we needed to do more with less, right? And now we're supposed to use agents and various AI tools to help us do more with less. But we're not always asked to do well. And so we know where to take the shortcuts within our domains, within our areas. But those shortcuts have an impact. Now, for most part, we've learned what that trade-off is. And what I would suggest is that with geo, some of those shortcuts are having an impact in ways that they didn't before. Certainly to do with how our websites are designed, how we might use JavaScript on a website to improve page load and only progressively load elements as necessary. That makes sense because we're solving for speed. The downside, of course, for the geos is they don't read JavaScript. They don't read dynamic elements on your website. If you have tabs on your websites, our 5 main benefits, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The tabs, it'll only see the top one because an LLM can't click. It can't do user interactions. And so some websites are designed in a way that all of that information is loaded in the HTML. That's great. Many are not because of the fashions. So it comes back to, it causes us to reevaluate what have we done because we did it for a reason. And then what is the impact? Because it has a different impact now in the world of geo because geo is operating, it cares about different things in different ways.
Hey everyone, it's me, Carrie Curran. If you're a B2B company that sells to marketers, whether you're an agency, MarTech, or AdTech, and your revenue is either flattening, declining, or just not growing fast enough, I can help. I've spent my entire career selling, marketing, and servicing marketers, so I know firsthand the challenges they face, the buying decisions they make, and what actually moves the needle. The truth is, most marketing strategies aren't built for revenue growth, but mine are. As your fractional Chief Growth Officer, I'll bring revenue-focused marketing strategies designed specifically for selling to marketers, deep expertise in agency, MarTech, and AdTech buying behaviors, modern go-to-market strategies that include everything from brand awareness to driving loyalty and retention, and a track record of doubling and even tripling revenue for B2B companies just like yours. So if you're tired of your stagnant results and you're ready to build a marketing engine that actually drives revenue, let's talk. Visit revenuebasedmarketing.com or connect with me on LinkedIn to schedule a consultation. Together, let's build a smarter, more profitable path forward. RBMA, Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors, we're revenue-based marketing that works. Yep. Yeah. No, that's really helpful. And I think too, as marketers are thinking about this strategy, this approach, kind of the pivot, you and I were talking about this shift of SEO. It's less of a technical crawlability play, to your point on, that it's not going through the links to page by page. And it almost goes back to, I started in SEO 19 years ago. I must have been the Doogie Howser of SEO. No, but back then it was a content play. Like, we weren't talking about crawlability as much. We were writing the content that I spent lots of time writing, not just title tags and meta descriptions and keyword tags, but also the body copy. And so when you talk about chunking content, there's an element of going back to writing content for the audience. But talk about that, like how is are those best practices coming back, and what we need to think about for that content writing?
I think it's true that the best, as people will say, it's just doing the right thing. It's doing what we know we're supposed to do, right? LLMs have difficulty trying to pass meaning from things that have personality. I mean, we complain about the writing sometimes being dry and formulaic and very kind of logical. That's kind of how it's best. It best understands information. When it receives information that way, it's easier for it to do the math that it needs to understand that this is an idea that relates to this idea that relates to this idea. So in the evolution of our AI systems, I guess, we humans know how to find the meaning within the poetry. An LLM doesn't know how to find the meaning within the poetry. I'm sure if an LLM read E.E. Cummings' poetry, it would be like, we ask questions, it would be baffled. It doesn't get that kind of, right? It wants to understand, it's much more literal. And so the challenge for us is to how do we provide this literality almost, if you will, without becoming too dry in what we actually say and how we say it. And in the future, we can imagine that the LLMs will become smarter and that they will be able to understand more of why, T.S. Eliot's writings are interesting and so forth. And D.H. Lawrence and it's, well, I don't want to go get into my skis here, but the point I'm trying to get at is it is going back to what we have always known how to do. It is understanding the impact of some of the shortcuts we have taken. It is recognizing that the LLM values different things in different levels compared to what the old SEO game had to do with. And then as these LLMs are not static, they change.
Well, and so so a couple things there. Like, first is so back then we knew that the Google algorithms were really trying to make a better user experience for the person making the query. And so, but to your point, we were taking these shortcuts to kind of try to get the content there. And so from the content perspective, that's really helpful to think about. And it's getting to your point, going back to what you were saying about buyer enablement, is like really having the content that speaks to your solution, your unique value prop, how your product or service really answers the help or the outcome that your target audience needs. So that's really helpful, and I think we all need to do better with that. But there's still a technical aspect, but it's a little bit different than the technical SEO we were looking at even 3, 4, 5 years ago. So talk a bit about kind of that, how the tagging and that technical aspect of the page code is more important than ever today.
Sure. So we know on our web pages we have these semantic tabs of H1, H2, H3, and H4, and H5, and H6, and so forth, right? And our CSS systems have tried to help us by saying, okay, an H1 is going to be this size font, it's going to be big, it's going to be this color, it's going to be this kind of typeface, and H2 will be represented by this type of font, and so forth. And so in many ways, we have come to think of these different tags as a graphical element. And so we might place them on our web pages in a graphical element kind of way. And I know that there are many websites that, for example, have an H6 right above an H2. And the H6 is kind of like small font, light gray, not to have too
like a
much
subheader
kind of
from a visual perspective,
exactly
not
right.
like informational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that for
Yeah.
us is kind of, we understand that. We understand that this is just kind of a graphically kind of thing. And sometimes those little subheaders are very few words because they're
Yep.
supposed to be minimal, not get in the way of reading. Okay. But to the LLM crawlers and bots that come to our websites, what we have done is we've turned what was a hierarchical way of demonstrating reference of information within information topic areas into a graphical element. So an ideal scenario from a kind of a technical perspective would be you have one H1. This is what the page is generally about. You might have multiple H2s, the subtopics. Within an H2, you may have several H3s that are the components of that subtopic, and perhaps even an H4 or 2 for the components within the H3s. And every time the H4 refers to what was in the H3, it's part of this grouping. The H3 refers up to, it's part of this H2 grouping. And so in the world of programming that we might have once, all gone through or might do regularly now, it's not necessary, but for visual purposes, we like to indent the code every time we kind of add another one of these layers in programming world. So it becomes easier to see that this is inside of this, inside of this, inside of this. Okay, so that is how the LLMs would like to see the information. So when we put an H6 above an H2, and then for graphical purposes have an H4 and then an H5 and skip H3, the referenceability of what idea kind of is encapsulated within what idea gets all very confusing. And if we were to kind of remap the information as the computer sees it, it would be kind of like, okay, that's a bit confusing. I don't quite get it because it's like this idea is now linked with this idea, which isn't our intent. Graphically, it looks nice. And what does that cause? It causes confusion. And when the LLMs are not, if it doesn't seem to find ideas on your website that are also found in other places, it assumes that something about your website is on the fringe, or something about that idea set is on the fringe. It's not generally the answer. It's a edge answer. And so you don't
So it sounds like
you don't become
sorry,
included in the answer, is what happens.
Yeah.
That's a mechanical thing. That's an example of a technical thing and how it has an impact, because the shortcut we took is we used the tagging as a graphical element because why not? So now we know why not.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And again, that's very actionable, right? Because you need as you said, the right idea within the right section and delineating your chunks of data to be more indicative to the header tags, but in a way that tells the LLM what this is about. And I think that's so important to think about in a relatively easy update to make. Another thing that we talked about as an old is new, again, is the concept of, we've talked a lot about on-site SEO, but there's now that off-site SEO aspect, again, that we need to be thinking about. So talk about, at a high level, like why that's important and some examples of what brands should be thinking about there.
Sure. So, for B2B marketers, we, of course, want our message and our ideas promulgated on as many different websites as possible, said by as many interesting and important and authoritative people as possible. That's just good marketing, whether that's because of your analyst relations or your public relations or your partner activity or your demand gen activity. You're trying to get your idea on many different shelves, right? So if you're selling toothpaste, you want to be on all of the shelves of all of the different places where they sell toothpaste. It's a terrible example, I know. Okay. So if you're a very small brand, you don't get a lot of web traffic.
Right.
So the signal that you're kind of you're like a who with your megaphone trying to speak into the world, and you're not being heard very much. So the impact that your website has on the idea set out there that has to do with your topic area may not be as loud as a much larger website from a more developed brand with more history and so forth. So we might want to just try hard to get our message out in all the directories that we can, and in all the different places that we can, because of course we know our traffic, we don't get a lot of traffic, but this site gets a lot of traffic, this site, so we want to kind of get that. Where this becomes important for brand, as you mentioned in your question, is that in the old days, if you worked at a large enterprise software company, there were the brand police, or some group that effectively felt as if that was their role. And everything that went out from the organization passed through the brand police to make sure it was the right words with the right imagery, saying the right things, not making up some new story, because large companies have got lots of people who are putting stuff out there. And if it's all different, it gets confusing for the customer to say, well, what actually do they do? I don't quite get it. It's confusing. Over here it says this, over here it says this, over here it says this. So we used to receive from on high the 25, 50, 100, and 150 word boilerplates that we're supposed to use when we go to a trade show and they say, please describe your business. When we have our solution listed in a partner website, when we give a talk about who we are and what we do, and all these different places. And this consistency was designed to help our customers know who we are and what we do without them having to gestalt up all these various ways to a level of abstraction that makes sense for them. And it works out the same way for LLMs. If they can see the same thing said the same way in lots of different places, it's pervasively found, that becomes trustable. And so therefore, there's not a lot of vector math that needs to go on to change the idea. It is the idea. And that makes it more likely to become part of an answer to a query. So this is just doing what we used to do, but understanding that every time the salesperson, the demand gen, the trade show, the PR, the AR, the partner person wants to change a word or two here or a word or two there so that they could take the generic thing and make it more appropriate for this context and make it more appropriate for this context. All those different contexts now that we kind of tune towards create differences. And it used to be that our audience would go directly to those sources, and so that tuning might have made sense in a way there, right? Even though we weren't necessarily supposed to do it. But when people are now disintermediated from those places of the origin source and just going to the LLM, and the LLM is now trying to figure out what all these different things mean, it will abstract up a layer to fluff, doesn't really help, or it will kind of say, not sure if I really understand this, I'm not going to include it in the answer at all.
Yeah. So consistency of what you're trying to say, it plays such an important role.
Yes.
As well.
Consistency. Yeah. That's the big word. That is a thing that we would wish for. And of course, humans are not the most consistent of kind of process people things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, David, this has been super valuable, and I appreciate your recommendations are very actionable and things we can do today. But for people listening and they are, recognizing they need to get started right away, like what is the first step or the most important first thing they should do to start moving in the right direction here?
So 2 thoughts come to mind. One is try to understand, how do these systems exactly work?
Yeah.
You don't need to get into too much technical stuff. You might kind of drag yourself through some things a little bit, just like you don't need to understand all of the ins and outs of SEO as a marketing leader, right? But you understand kind of the impact. So I would suggest learn. And if you are in a particular lane of expertise like SEO or the website, it still makes sense to learn the bigger picture, because you'll understand the why and how. And when you understand that, you'll preemptively know how to make choices that align with the new way, right? As opposed to just learning a new trick. It's not about accumulating tricks. It's about a slightly different methodology of how things are surfaced.
Yep.
So understand, and then depending on your team size, you may be a big team with agencies, or you may just be a very small team. You're going to want to do some kind of triage on where will we try and work on this first.
Yep.
So if you have a large team, I would suggest, I've done this a few times, it's very helpful if you can get all the team together so that they hear the one story on what this all is, and they all can understand how each other's actions impact each other. And within their lane, they kind of say, okay, this is what I can do now. This is how it changes for me, and so forth and so on. If you're an agency that specializes in just one way, then it's important, I think, for you to learn how your activity set is very focused and where it has an impact, but also to recognize the things that you're not able to do because that's not in your agency's purview. And in some ways, it helps set expectations. So you do want to understand, if you will, to the tricks level. I hate to use the term tricks because it sounds like it's cheapening things. Some of it's really hard work, and I don't mean to cheapen it.
Yeah.
But if you're only worried about the web page yourself, that's your thing. You may not know how to impact the wider world, but you may want to have you would wish that the rest of the team did.
Yeah.
Right. So starting out with learning, then do a kind of an audit, triaging what you think is effective that you can handle, right? This isn't a do it for 3 months and we're done kind of a thing, just like SEO was never done it once and done. Like our websites are always changing. Indeed, that's part of the challenge.
And the algorithms are always changing. So
they very much
are. Be ongoing. Yep.
One thing I'd say, just coming back to basics, be seen where your customers historically have always gone.
Yep.
All of these LLMs are trained on different data. They have different information sets that they find in their real live retrieval. They have different models that pull together ideas in different ways, and they all have different content licensing arrangements today. And in the future, these LLMs may differentiate, and part of that differentiation might be based on the different content areas that they're going to try and become more zoned in on.
Yep.
Or, as they go forward in the future, the different LLMs will start to fill in the content holes that they may have. So, for example, Reddit has all of a sudden, lit up because it's been understood by one measuring vendor that one of the LLMs leans very heavily on information that's extracted from Reddit.
Yep.
Cool. So Reddit is suing Anthropic now. Why? Because Anthropic has been scraping information from Reddit without paying for it. And so we can expect in the not so distant future that there will be a licensing arrangement between Anthropic for Claude and Reddit, right? ChatGPT has recently signed something with Reddit as well. Why do I mention this? Because any measurement that we may see from a particular vendor is a snapshot of a window of time of measurement based on the arrangements that existed at that moment. So if the same snapshot was taken a year from now, we might find very different information source profiles based on what arrangements have been made. And so if you know your customers are spending time, if we go back to Reddit, in Reddit, then being present in Reddit makes sense. But if your customers don't, then it might not. Why put all the time there? Because that's not where your other competitors are playing, right? So go where your customers go would be part of the advice on the triage and trying to put things into perspective. Just because everyone says, oh, ChatGPT uses Wikipedia.
Yeah, right.
It might not look that way next year. Excuse me. I hope that's helpful.
Well, excellent, David. This has been super helpful. So for the folks listening that want, to learn more from you, or maybe want to bring you in to help their team get started here, how do people find you and get in touch with you?
The best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. My name, David Kirkdorffer, Kirk, D for David, ORFF as in Frank, ER. And my email is firstname.lastname @gmail.com. You can reach me that way too. Send me a DM. I write about these things on LinkedIn. I'm providing training classes to teams so they can, become aware of the strategy and the tactics. It's very hands-on tactical elements to what I'm doing. It's not all kind of in the air theory about vector math. It's really not. It's about how to do tabs, how to do accordions, how to do things so that they are actually readable. Things like LLMs text, which is a new idea, importance of schema, and how schema helps with chunkability, and various other tactical kind of things like that. So if people want to dive in and have conversations that way, please just reach out via LinkedIn is probably the easiest way.
Perfect. And I'll have those links in the show notes as well. But David, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise with us today. We really appreciate your time and everything you've shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerry, and thank you to the audience. If you've made it this far, that's a compliment. I appreciate that. And very much enjoyed the conversation.
Huge thanks to David Kirkdorffer for joining me on the show. If your brand isn't showing up in AI-generated answers, this conversation is your roadmap to change that. From content structure to message consistency to offsite visibility, David laid out actionable ways to adapt your SEO strategy to this new era of AI-driven buyer behavior. If you found this valuable, share it with your team and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And for more strategic insights on revenue growth through marketing, head to revenuebasedmarketing.com or follow me, Carrie Curran, on LinkedIn today.